Episode 2 improves on the sturdy, if imperfect, foundation of Episode 1. The writing is sharper, the characterization is more well-defined, and the emotional sequences hit a lot harder than they did previously. Now, I want to try to do something different with these reviews from here on out, and give them something resembling a thesis statement. My goal will be to focus on a specific aspect of a given episode and hone in on it, analyzing that aspect both as a hardcore fan of the books, and as someone with an educational and professional background in filmmaking.
It's a real film, Jack.
I want to cover the show in a way that's going to differentiate me from the crowd, you know? So if you're looking for more of a general overview of the Wheel of Time series, both in terms of the books or the show, check out these channels. They're really good. Trust me. I'll leave a few links in the bio. So, with the preamble out of the way, what's the theme for today's episode? Chapter 1, Characters and World Building, part of a complete and balanced breakfast.
Essential for the success of your fantasy series.
After watching episode 2 multiple times, I've come to realize that the show is doing something consistently impressive, at least in the story department. And that's how it uses character conflicts to simultaneously acquaint us with the dynamics of the universe, and to define who each of these people are, both in relation to their surroundings and the other characters. Does that sound like jargon?
Let me explain.
So, fantasy fiction like this usually has rules that constitute the overall makeup of the world you're in.
Smokey, this is not Nam, this is bowling. There are rules. Hey.
These rules can range from magic systems, cultural practices, political positions, religious observations, etc., etc. Now, the rules are often varied, nuanced, and complex because said complexities constitute much of the pleasure that can be derived from digging into stories like this.
Oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper.
Through engaging with and learning more about the world as the author is building it, the audience constantly feels as if they're being rewarded with new information and, ideally, they feel satisfied due to their continuous growing understanding of said world. Learning about a universe can be addicting, and in the case of some series, the more information that we get to learn, the more engaged we could feasibly become. But it's really important to recognize that this kind of storytelling has its limits. Sometimes, lore-rich fantasy worlds have the potential to bore and repel audiences as much as they do engage and rouse them. In order to keep things interesting, a skillful storyteller should find a way to meld emotionally satisfying character work with world building in such a way that one informs the other.
It's wonderful to see you, Gandalf!
We do that by presenting characters with conflict, external and internal. These conflicts should be just as small and human feeling as they are fantastic and otherworldly in a fantasy setting.
I am your father.
No. It's not true.
With that in mind, I think one can appreciate the Herculean task that both Robert Jordan and the writers of the show have to face, especially in these early sections, where laying the groundwork for both important character and world is critical to the series' success in the long run. And you know what? I think it's probably even harder if you're writing for the show. These writers have like 8 episodes and all about an hour each to explore at least 7 main characters, multiple side characters, and a world notorious for being expansive as all hell. All on a budget that looks like it could be offered on the McDonald's dollar menu. So, with that in mind, how did they do?
Nice.
To focus on the way in which these writers streamline both character development and world building in this episode, I'm going to pick apart 3 specific examples. Each of these examples demonstrate the writer's current handle on both the protagonists and the universe in a way that I find pretty satisfying. So, without further ado...
You ready?
Chapter 2, if Weep for Manetheren was on Spotify, it would be my most played song of the year, but it's not, so instead I'm gonna gush about it here. Alright, allow me to be the 1 billionth person to talk about how good this scene is.
Manetheren, weep for the blood of Aemon, cry for Manetheren, long ago.
In addition to just being a great song and an indication that Robert Jordan's fixation on music in the series is going to be maintained in this adaptation, this section of the episode is doing a ton of heavy lifting, both in terms of character development and world building. In it, the 2 Rivers folk sing a song about a bloody war that they had no idea actually transpired on their own home soil. Moraine explains that the war from Manetheren constituted a group of brave soldiers and villagers, all fighting for their homeland alongside Queen Eldrine. The gist of the story is that the odds were stacked against them. The people of Manetheren knew that they were facing almost certain death, and yet they fought on. But what is this clip doing? Why is it here? The numbers, Mason, what do they mean? This song and story are a way to establish important cultural information about the two rivers that sets up future symbols surrounding the fallen kingdom of Manetheren. Audiences who remember this piece of world building going forward get to have the satisfaction of putting one and one together when the song and story come up in later seasons.
It's good to remember Manetheren.
But from a character perspective, the telling of this story constitutes different types of development for different subsets of these characters. In the broadest possible sense, this song and story reveal a lot about the cultural attitudes that inform every villager of the two rivers, including the 4 villagers currently riding with Moraine. Let's talk about the two rivers folk kinda generally first. There are people who are constantly described in both the books and the show as being remarkably stubborn.
Who says I'm from the two rivers?
It's written all over you. Your asinine attitude. Stubborn as a mule.
But rather than passing this off as a stereotype, this story grounds that stubbornness in a historical context. The battle for Manetheren is the ultimate show of stubbornness turned resilience, as it describes the trial of a people who absolutely refuse to back down against insurmountable odds. And even if that piece of history has been lost, the effects of it have reverberated throughout the cultural identity of these people. Let's consider the Battle of Winternight.
Come and get some of this!
Before ever hearing this story, audiences may have noticed just how many Two Rivers folks stood up to fight the Trollocs, even if they were completely outnumbered. And while a casual viewer can easily dismiss this as a thing that the writers need to make the battle more interesting, observant viewers, like you, will notice just how much this battle is a reflection of the one told in the story.
It's like poetry, sort of, they rhyme.
It's the plight of a stubborn and resilient people who refuse to back down no matter the odds. And this kind of attitude, of course, reflects the trials and tribulations of our central characters, Rand, Egwene, Mat, and Perrin. None of these characters want to become a hero, despite being told that one of them is going to become the hero in the form of the Dragon Reborn. Any of these characters may want to run away, but they don't. These are people of the Two Rivers, and it is within their cultural identity not to back down. This scene gives us crucial information about the world, while also giving us crucial information about the characters. We learn about the cultural makeup of the Two Rivers while exploring the inner conflict of characters caught between culture and desire. And you know what? They do it again later. Chapter 3, I Ain't 'Fraid of No White Cloaks. This episode of the Wheel of Time also introduces us to the Children of the Light, or the White Cloaks for the layman. Within the span of 2 scenes, we immediately come to understand who these people are, why we should care about them, and what internal conflicts they have that will make following them down the road interesting. So, the White Cloaks. What do they do? Do they do things? Let's find out. So this episode opens up with the single best shot in the entire series so far, tracking a serving boy delivering this opulent-looking dish to one of the questioners, Eamon Valda. Valda eats a dish that cuts the top of his mouth in front of a bound and gagged Aes Sedai, who's about to be burnt to a crisp. He comments on the brutality of the dish, takes off the serpent ring, and then enjoys a drink at his banquet table while watching the world's most sadistic bonfire. So, couple things we've learned. First, the Children of the Light are a well-funded organization of people who, at least on some level, are totally okay with the brutal execution of Aes Sedai by their own hands. We also learn, equally as crucial, that Aes Sedai can be killed and that they are mortal. I feel like us book fans take this for granted, but when you're introducing a group of magical superwomen with fire powers, it's important to understand that these people are still susceptible to danger. So by virtue of this being the first that we see of the children, it's safe to assume that all of them will be like this. Right? Right?
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Enter Jeffrem Bornhold in a later scene, leading a party of children and ready to subvert your expectations harder than Rian Johnson. This next scene simultaneously establishes who these people are in a more grounded sense, while also laying the groundwork for conflicts that will likely plague them as the series goes on. Lan informs Moraine that they're about to cross paths with the White Cloaks, so Moraine hides her ring immediately. Bornhold holds them up, asks them where they're going and where they've been. Moraine is able to bend the truth enough to wave suspicion away from her, before revealing that she has a wound that needs to be treated. Upon investigating the wound, Bornhold says this.
We children try to steer clear of the Aes Sedai where we can. When you get to Whitebridge, find one. Only one of those women can heal this wound.
Yo, listen to me. Heed my words. When I first heard this for the first time, I squealed. This little line is such a masterstroke, and I cannot contain how much I love it. In the space of one line, The writers have shown us nearly everything we need to know about this organization's relationship with the Aes Sedai. Despite ostensibly being against them due to their association with being witches,
Wars and witches don't concern us, sir.
the White Cloaks are divided over how much they can actually be tolerant of them. Some will delight in brutality and death due to an opinion that these people are beneath them, while others recognize the need for Aes Sedai in the world and can be tolerant of their existence in some circumstances. In other words, these are people whose prejudices are complex. They are systemically ingrained, but nuanced in their individual applications. This conflict is also explored visually once Eamon Valda takes over the proceedings.
I'm sorry. We have one of the questioners with us today. He will be thorough, but brief.
Valda treats Moraine and the party much differently. While Bornhold is willing to give these people the benefit of the doubt, Valda assumes that everyone is against him and the light.
I will not forget your faces should we meet again.
Once the White Cloaks finish in this interaction, they part ways, but not before Valda hits Bornhold with a telling line.
The woman said the Trollocs went west.
You are meant for battle. We questioners have a higher purpose.
Not only do these men not behave in the same way in their execution of their beliefs, but their senses of superiority are different. Bornhold has a job and he's gonna do it, but Valda thinks of himself as noble, higher than Bornhold, and therefore, he thinks that he can get away with way more invasive and inhumane behavior. And based on what we've seen so far, he can. Valda is a monster, but he's one that people like Bornhold allow to exist. While introducing us to the White Cloaks' belief system, the show also introduces us to systems of individual agency that underscore the execution of their beliefs and how that execution largely stands in conflict and is enabled by other members of the organization. And again, this is accomplished in 2 scenes. That makes me happy. Now, we've reached the final part of the analysis before we dig into the final Loose Threads chapter. And I'm going to talk about another important aspect of world building and character development in this episode, and oh my god, there's so much to discuss. We could talk about Shadar Logoth, the introduction of Egwene's powers, the increased presence of Shadow Spawn, and their structure as displayed visually by this scene. But no, I have something better. Chapter 4, a petty argument about 20 minutes in. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but the moment that this entire series started to click for me is this scene where all the characters start to squabble after Rand's first nightmare. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, I think this scene could be studied by anybody looking to adapt an unruly and quote-unquote unfilmable series in a way that simultaneously builds characters, builds the mechanics of the world, and then surprisingly mitigates potential issues in the original text that deemed it unruly to begin with. Let's talk about that whole issues in the original text part first. Now, early Wheel of Time novels, but especially Eye of the World, deal with nightmare sequences that the characters quickly realize may not be nightmares at all, but visitations by, well, for the sake of spoilers, let's just call them a dark entity. These nightmare sequences are often pretty frightening in nature, but they are, at least in a cinematic sense, kinda long, repetitive, and pretty talky. I can understand the need to condense these as much as possible, so rather than front-loading us with information as they do in the books, the writers keep things a mystery. There is no indication here of who is popping up in these nightmares, and the writers use that sense of the unknown to their advantage by having it fuel a conflict between Rand and Moraine, which eventually spirals into a conflict between him and the entire party. So to show you what I mean, I want to go beat by beat. Okay, Rand wakes up, sees dead bats all over the ground, and has a perfectly reasonable outburst. But true to the spirit of his character, Rand needs to communicate that he does not trust Moraine to help with these problems.
Did you put this in our dreams?
Boom! Hard conflict, introduced. The scene gets interesting. Rand charges towards Moraine, and Lan gets an opportunity to exercise his warder bond by standing in front of him. There's now conflict between them. Lan sees Rand as a threat, albeit not a strong one. Moraine, taken aback, takes control of the situation.
The horse is arrested.
No!
Rand presses and presses.
And then
to the White Tower. I've told you this.
And then what?
At this point, he doesn't want to trust Moraine. He wants to be right, to go home, to be done with all of this. Moraine, knowing that she has no chance of controlling Rand right now, disengages entirely, leaving Rand to spiral. Now there's escalated conflict between Rand and Egwene, because this isn't a matter of Egwene becoming the wisdom anymore. She's becoming the very thing that Rand is most distrustful of.
What did she promise you last night? That you're the one? Come on, do you really think she's any better than what's chasing us?
And as a result, Egwene has to put Rand in his place.
Moiraine has done nothing but protect us, tried to keep us safe, and she does it. Even with you being the stubborn bastard you are.
And then he lashes out again, despite clearly and obviously knowing that she's right.
If I were her, I'd leave you behind too.
You already did.
And then there's Matt, who kinda does the right thing by placating Rand a bit, while also letting Rand know that he's being an ass and that he should probably just play it cool for a while.
You're right about Moiraine. Till then, the lady does shoot fireballs, so let's try and stay on her good side.
The writers took an opportunity not only to streamline this potentially difficult section of the book by relegating it to mystery, but then use that mystery to fuel conflicts amongst the characters. Bravo! This is good. This is really, really good. And now, before we end today's review, I just want to comment on a couple of things from this episode that didn't really fit neatly into the place of this analysis. Chapter 5, Loose Threads of the Pattern. Again. This is the first time we've seen the opening sequence so far. It's okay. I think this show has much stronger musical moments that are currently offered outside of the sequence, but the visuals are nice and I like how jagged the flows look. They're crunchy. I just want to bite them. This Tar and Fairy sequence rules. This is a show that has consistently struggled with its big set piece moments, but this one really hits because it's kept very intimate. Also, rip to this poor ferryman. Now, this show will occasionally bust out some pretty impressive filmmaking, but oh god, this scene ain't it. Moiraine is healing the horses, and this is the first indication that we're supposed to have that she's struggling to hold things together health-wise. But like, we mostly just see the back of her head. I swear to god, if my directing prof from film school saw this, he'd probably be like very upset with me. Hey, people who have been following the production of this show, do we know if Moraine's staff got cut at any point? I ask because I'm pretty sure you could see it in this shot, but it's like nowhere else. Is that a staff? Is that the Moiraine staff? Is Moraine's staff? Is that it? What is this? I like this line.
You don't listen to the wind, Egwene. It's the wind that listens to you.
I'm not locked in here with you.
You're locked in here with me.
I also really like this line.
We will always tell the truth. It just may not be the truth you think you hear. So listen carefully.
This is something that Aes Sedai get branded with a lot in the books as an insult, and her just using it as a point of pride is baller as fuck. And as for Shadar Logoth, look, the budget's still an issue, and I think Mashadar looks awkward as hell, but I'm generally happy with the design, the mood, and the way this was handled. Except, okay, I don't understand this change that they made, where they have to make Lamb look like a stupid dumb idiot face for bringing them here, even though it's like entirely not his fault. And I always thought that the point of this sequence in the books that made it so strong was that this was their first opportunity to put trust into these wool-headed farmers who really don't reciprocate trust back. But hey, it's still spooky and fun, and I like the chase at the end. Chapter 6. Oh, what a wonderful broken world this could be. Shadow's Waiting is good. I think it's the second strongest of the episodes I've seen thus far, and at the time of writing this script, I've only seen the first 4 episodes, and I like it more and more upon reflection. This show is obviously working through some growing pains at this point, but there's an obvious leap in quality here that I admire, and it's been fun watching this show slowly but surely grow into itself. Overall, let's call it a 7.5 on 10, not bad. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for coming back to watch this, and thank you so much for the positive support that the first episode got. Like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you gotta do, share this video around, everything helps. And may you always find water and shade.